Predictably Irrational, revised and expanded edition by Dan Ariely. Imagine an 18-year-old soldier on an ordinary Friday afternoon in Israel. Without warning, a massive magnesium flare, the kind that turns night into day on a battlefield, detonates right beside him. In a horrifying instant, 70% of his body is engulfed in third-degree burns. What follows is 3 years confined to a hospital room, his world reduced to white walls and relentless pain. Every single day, nurses wrapped him in fresh bandages. And every single day, they had to remove the old ones. Their method was straightforward. Soak him in disinfectant solution, grab a corner of the gauze, and rip it off as quickly as possible. The logic seemed sound. Better to endure brief, intense agony than prolonged suffering, right? But lying there in that bed, the young man felt something the nurses couldn't see: the mounting dread before each rip, the unpredictability of when the next wave of pain would hit, the complete absence of any comfort or control. He begged them to try something different. Go slower. Start with the less painful areas. Work gradually toward the worst parts. But they were the experts after all. They knew best. So they continued with their logical, rational, and absolutely excruciating approach. That young man was Dan Ariely. And those agonizing hours in the burn ward planted a question in his mind that would shape his entire career. Why do intelligent, caring, well-intentioned people consistently make obviously wrong decisions? The nurses weren't sadistic. They simply followed flawed logic. They were being irrational, but in a way that was completely, utterly predictable. Today, we're diving into Dan Ariely's groundbreaking work, Predictably Irrational. This isn't just a quirky tour of human behavior. It's your field guide to the invisible forces secretly steering every decision you make. From your morning coffee choice to your romantic relationships, to how you think about your own moral compass, these forces are always at work. By the time we're done, you'll see yourself and the world around you through an entirely new lens. You'll understand why you put things off until tomorrow, why free has an almost magical hold over you, and why you're simultaneously Jekyll and Hyde. Here's the truth. You're not a rational being. None of us are. But here's the good news. Our irrationality isn't random chaos. It follows patterns. It's predictable. And once you understand these patterns, you can start working with them instead of against them. So let's dive into the hidden architecture of your own mind. Dan Ariely's journey starts with a simple but profound realization. We walk through life believing we're in complete control. We see ourselves as rational creatures, just as Hamlet declared, noble in reason, infinite in faculty, in apprehension how like a god. Traditional economics is built entirely on this assumption that we're all walking calculators, carefully weighing every option to maximize our outcomes. But as Ariely discovered in that hospital bed, and as he proves repeatedly through fascinating experiments, this view of humanity is mostly mythology. We're not rational. We're something far more interesting. We're predictably irrational. Our mistakes aren't random. They follow a script hardwired deep into our brains. And the first most powerful force in that script is what he calls the principle of relativity. Think about this for a moment. Do you actually know what a new phone is worth, or a car, or a college education? The truth is, most of us have no internal value meter. We figure out what something's worth by comparing it to something else. We don't know what we want until we see it in context. Ariely stumbled onto a perfect example while browsing The Economist's website. They offered 3 subscription options. First, online-only access for $59 seemed fair enough. Second, print-only for $125. A bit steep, but okay. And third, print plus web access for $125. Wait, what? Ariely read it twice. Who would possibly choose print only when you could get both print and web for the exact same price? It looked like a mistake. But Ariely, with his finely tuned radar for human quirks, suspected it was actually brilliant. The print-only option was what he calls a decoy. Nobody would ever choose it, but it served a secret, powerful purpose. It made the print and web option look like an incredible bargain. Compared to print only at $125, the print and web combo for the same price felt like getting web access for free. It was a no-brainer. To test this, he presented the options to 100 sharp MIT students. The results? 16 chose web only, 0 chose the print-only decoy, and a whopping 84 chose the print and web combo. But here's where it gets fascinating. He ran the test again, this time removing the decoy entirely. Students now had just two choices: web only for $59, or print and web for $125. Rationally, since nobody picked the decoy anyway, removing it shouldn't matter, right? Wrong. Everything shifted. This time, 68 students chose web only, and only 32 picked the expensive combo. The decoy, the option nobody wanted, had been secretly shaping their decisions all along. Its sole function was to make the pricier option look better by comparison. This decoy effect is everywhere, quietly nudging us in directions we don't notice. It's why real estate agents show you a house that's similar to their target property, but in slightly worse condition. Suddenly, the target house looks fantastic. It's why restaurants list ridiculously expensive dishes. They don't expect you to order them. They expect you to see them and order the second most expensive dish, which now seems reasonable. Ariely even tested this in dating. His advice? If you're heading to a bar, bring a friend who shares your basic features, same hair color, similar build, but who's slightly less attractive. You'll be perceived not just as better looking than your friend, but as more attractive than many others in the room. You've provided an easy, favorable comparison. Just, maybe don't tell your friend they're the decoy. That conversation never ends well. This principle of relativity has a darker side, though. It fuels jealousy and envy. We're constantly comparing our lives, salaries, homes, and achievements to those around us. Ariely shares a story about an executive whose young employee complained about his salary. The executive was baffled. "When you started 3 years ago," he said, "you hoped to make about $100,000. Now you're making almost $300,000. What's the problem?" The young man hesitated. "Well, the two guys at the desks next to me are making $310. He wasn't unhappy with his salary in absolute terms. He was unhappy in relative terms. Ariely points out this is why CEO salaries exploded after disclosure became mandatory in the 90s. The intention was to shame companies into paying less, but instead, it just gave every CEO a new comparison benchmark, and they all wanted to be above average. The cure for this destructive side of relativity? Consciously control your circles of comparison. When house hunting, skip touring mansions far beyond your budget. At your class reunion, step away from the person bragging about their fortune and have a real conversation with someone else. As entrepreneur James Hong wisely did, sell your Porsche Boxster and buy a Toyota Prius instead. As he explained, "I don't want to live the life of a Boxster, because when you get a Boxster you wish you had a 911, and people who have 911s wish they had a Ferrari." The only cure is breaking the cycle of relativity. But comparison is just one hidden force shaping us. Another equally powerful force is the idea of the quote, 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 quote. Ariely tells the incredible story of Salvador Asiel, the Pearl King. In the 70s, Asiel discovered a new type of pearl, from French Polynesia, black pearls. They were strange-looking, the size of musket balls, and nobody wanted them. He tried selling them and failed completely. He could have unloaded them cheap, but instead he did something brilliant. He approached his friend, legendary gem dealer Harry Winston, and convinced him to display a string of these black pearls in his Fifth Avenue window right next to diamonds and rubies, with an outrageously high price tag. Then Ariely ran full-page ads in glossy magazines showing the black pearls alongside emeralds and diamonds. Suddenly, black pearls weren't just weird sea growths, they were precious jewels. He had anchored their value to the world's most expensive gems. And that's where their price has stayed ever since. Our minds work similarly. The first price we see for a new product sets an anchor in our minds, and from then on, we judge all other prices for that product relative to that initial anchor. To demonstrate how bizarrely powerful this is, Ariely conducted one of his most famous experiments. He had students write down the last 2 digits of their Social Security number. Then he asked, "Would you pay that amount in dollars for this bottle of wine?" So if your digits were 79, you'd consider paying $79. After they answered yes or no, he held an actual auction for the wine. The results were stunning. Students with the highest Social Security numbers, 80 to 99, consistently bid the highest amounts. Those with the lowest numbers, 1 to 20, bid the lowest. A completely random, arbitrary number from their Social Security card had become an anchor shaping how much they were willing to pay. This phenomenon is called arbitrary coherence. The initial price is arbitrary, but once it's set, we become coherent and consistent in our decisions from that point forward. This is also how we develop habits. Ariely calls it self-herding. Imagine your first time at Starbucks. You're used to paying $1 for coffee at Dunkin' Donuts, but you walk in curious and buy a small coffee for, say, $2.20. You enjoy it. Next time you pass Starbucks, you have a decision to make. Instead of doing complex calculations of price versus quality versus convenience, your brain takes a shortcut. It says, "I came here last time and enjoyed it. Must be a good decision." So you do it again. Now you've become the second person in line, standing behind yourself. After a few more times, it's no longer a decision. It's a habit. Your anchor for coffee prices has been moved. Now, if our sense of value is so easily manipulated by decoys and random anchors, what happens when we introduce the most powerful price of all? The price of zero. Think about it. Is there much difference between a chocolate that costs 2 cents and one that costs 1 cent? Sure, a small one. But what about the difference between a chocolate that costs 1 cent and one that's free? That difference is massive. Zero isn't just another price. It's an emotional trigger, a source of irrational excitement. Ariely and his team set up a simple experiment. They offered people a choice between a Hershey's Kiss for 1 cent and a high-quality Lindt truffle for 15 cents. Most people, being rational, made a quick cost-benefit analysis and chose the superior Lindt truffle. About 73% did. Then they changed the prices, lowering both by 1 cent. Now the Hershey's Kiss was free, and the Lindt truffle was 14 cents. The price difference was exactly the same. The relative value was identical. Rationally, the results should have been the same. But they weren't. The moment the Kiss became free, it became like a magnetic force. Now a staggering 69% chose the free Kiss, giving up the chance to get far superior chocolate for a very good price. The word free made them switch their choice and end up with something they actually wanted less. Why does this happen? Ariely believes it's because we're fundamentally afraid of loss. When we choose something that costs money, even just 14 cents, There's a tiny risk we've made a bad decision. There's potential downside. But when something's free, there's no apparent downside, no possibility of loss, and that emotional safety is irresistible. This irrational pull of free explains so many behaviors. It's why we'll stand in a long line for a free ice cream cone when our time is worth far more than the cone's price. It's why Amazon sales in France exploded when they changed their shipping from 1 franc, about 20 cents, to completely free. 1 franc was almost zero, but it wasn't zero. That small difference was everything. It's why Ariely himself admits to buying an Audi he didn't really need over a more practical minivan, partly because it came with 3 years of free oil changes, a benefit worth only about $150 on a multi-thousand-dollar purchase, but the word free gave it unjustifiable power over his decision. This brings us to one of the book's most profound ideas. Ariely suggests we live our lives in 2 completely different worlds, governed by 2 different sets of rules. One is the world of market norms, and the other is the world of social norms. The world of market norms is one of prices, wages, and payments. It's sharp-edged. You get what you pay for. It's transactional. The world of social norms, on the other hand, is the world of community, favors, and mutual kindness. It's warm and fuzzy. You help a friend move a couch not because they're paying you, but because that's what friends do. You don't expect them to immediately come move your couch. It's based on long-term goodwill. Life works beautifully when we keep these 2 worlds separate, but when they collide, things get awkward fast. Ariely paints a vivid picture. Imagine you're at Thanksgiving dinner at your mother-in-law's house. The meal is incredible. At the end of the night, full and happy, you stand up, pull out your wallet, and say, "Mom, for all the love you've put into this, how much do I owe you? Is $300 enough?" The entire room goes silent. Your niece starts crying. You've just committed a cardinal sin. You've taken a beautiful act from the world of social norms, a gift of love and family, and dragged it into the cold, transactional world of market norms. You've implied her love has a price tag. To test this scientifically, Ariely had people perform a simple but boring computer task, dragging circles into a box. One group was paid $5. They dragged an average of 159 circles. A second group was paid just 50 cents. They applied market norms, decided 50 cents wasn't much, and only dragged 101 circles. But a third group was asked to do it as a favor. They were paid nothing. How many circles did they drag? 168. They worked harder for free than the people paid 50 cents, and about as hard as those paid $5. When money wasn't mentioned, they operated in the world of social norms. They were happy to help out for a good cause. But the moment even a small amount of money was introduced, their brains switched to market norms, and 50 cents just wasn't worth the effort. This explains a famous story about the AARP, which asked lawyers if they'd provide services to needy retirees for a discounted rate of $30 an hour. The lawyers said no. Then the AARP had a brilliant idea. They asked if the lawyers would do it for free. Overwhelmingly, the lawyers said yes. At $30 an hour, they were in the market world, and it was a bad deal. At $0, they were in the social world, and they were happy to volunteer. You can't be in both worlds at once. This is why, Ariely warns, companies that try to act like your family or your good neighbor are playing with fire. They build a social relationship with you, but the moment they hit you with a hefty late fee instead of a friendly phone call, that social relationship shatters, possibly forever. As a daycare center in Israel discovered, once you replace a social norm, parental guilt for being late, with a market norm, a fine for being late. You can't go back. When they removed the fine, parents didn't feel guilty again. They just kept showing up late, now for free. So far, we've seen how our decisions are shaped by external forces like relativity, anchors, and social norms. But perhaps the most unsettling part of Ariely's work is when he turns his lens inward, to the battle raging inside each of us. We all believe we know ourselves. We think we can predict how we'll act in a given situation. But can we? Ariely and his colleague George Lowenstein set up an experiment at Berkeley to test one of the most powerful emotional forces we experience: sexual arousal. They recruited male undergraduate students. In their first session, students were in a normal, calm, cold state. They answered questions about their sexual preferences and morals, but they had to predict how they'd answer if they were intensely aroused. Would they ever engage in morally questionable behavior to have sex? No way. Would they always use a condom no matter what? Of course. Would they be interested in kinky or strange sexual activities? Not really. Then came the second session. Students went to their dorm rooms with a laptop. Their task was to get themselves into a highly aroused, hot state, then answer the exact same questions. The results were, in Ariely's words, frighteningly clear. The students were two completely different people. In their hot state, their predicted willingness to engage in morally questionable acts more than doubled. Their willingness to have unsafe sex shot up. Their interest in a whole range of strange sexual activities skyrocketed. They were like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. In his calm, rational Jekyll state, the student is a good person who respects others and makes safe choices. But in his aroused, passionate Hyde state, his morals and good sense disappear from the radar screen. The most shocking part wasn't that they changed. It was that in their cold state, they had absolutely no idea how much they would change. They were strangers to themselves. This isn't just about sex. It applies to all our emotional states: anger, hunger, fear, excitement. Our calm, rational self is terrible at predicting how our emotional self will behave. This is why advice like, "just say no," often fails. We make that promise in a cold state, but face the temptation in a hot state. A better strategy, Ariely suggests, is recognizing this gap and avoiding temptation altogether before it takes hold. It's easier to stay away from the fire than to try pulling your hand back once you've started to feel the heat. This same battle between our two selves is the root of another universal human struggle: procrastination. We all know we should save for retirement, exercise more, and eat healthier. We make these plans in a cool, rational state. But then the moment of temptation arrives, the hot state. That beautiful pair of shoes we must have, the comfortable couch that's so much more appealing than a run, the slice of chocolate cake whispering our name. We give in to immediate gratification and put our long-term goals off until tomorrow. Ariely, as a university professor, saw this constantly with his students. So he ran an experiment. He taught 3 sections of the same class. In the first class, he set 3 firm, evenly spaced deadlines for papers throughout the semester. This was the dictatorial approach. In the second class, he gave them complete freedom. They could turn in all 3 papers anytime, as long as it was by the last day of class. In the third class, he offered a middle ground. Students had to choose their own deadlines for the 3 papers at the beginning of the semester, and they'd be penalized for missing their self-imposed deadlines. Which class got the best grades? The class with dictated, firm deadlines did best. The class with total freedom did worst. And the class that could set their own deadlines fell right in the middle. This tells us two crucial things. First, restricting freedom is actually the best cure for procrastination. But second, and more importantly, most of us know we have a procrastination problem. The students in the third class recognized their weakness and used the tool Ariely gave them to pre-commit to a better course of action. They weren't as successful as the group with dictated deadlines because not all of them set optimal deadlines for themselves, but they were far more successful than the group with no structure at all. The lesson is that the best way to defeat procrastination is through pre-commitment. It's our rational, cool state self making a decision that locks our future, hot state self into the right behavior. It's why automatic 401k deductions are so effective. It's why Ariely proposes a self-control credit card that would let you preset your own spending limits. For example, no more than $20 a week on coffee, or no spending at all on candy between 2 and 5 in the afternoon. It's about recognizing our weakness and building systems to protect us from ourselves. And this brings us to the final, and perhaps most challenging aspect of our irrationality, our own honesty. We all believe we're good, moral people, but are we? Ariely begins by pointing out a startling fact. In 2004, the total cost of all robberies, burglaries, and auto thefts in the United States was about $16 billion. That same year, the estimated cost of employee theft and fraud was $600 billion. The vast majority of dishonesty doesn't come from a few professional criminals. It comes from millions of ordinary people who consider themselves honest, but who cheat just a little bit. To understand this, Ariely ran a series of experiments. He gave participants a simple math test and paid them for each correct answer. The control group just handed in their paper to be graded. On average, they solved about 3 or 4 problems. Another group was allowed to grade their own paper, shred their original worksheet, and just tell the experimenter how many they got right. These people, with the opportunity to cheat, claimed they solved an average of 6 problems. They cheated, but just by a little bit. In another version, they could shred all their papers and take the money they earned from a jar full of cash. Even with no chance of getting caught, they still cheated by about the same small amount. Nobody claimed to get all the answers right. Nobody emptied the jar. What was going on? Ariely's theory is that we all have what he calls a personal fudge factor. We have 2 competing desires. On one hand, we want to benefit from cheating. On the other hand, we want to look at ourselves in the mirror and feel like we're good, honest people. So we cheat, but only up to the point where our self-image as a good person isn't tarnished. We find ways to rationalize our small dishonesties. But then Ariely discovered something remarkable. He ran the same experiment again, with a twist. Just before the math test, he asked one group to write down the 10 commandments, as many as they could remember. The other group wrote down 10 books they'd read in high school. Then they took the test, with the opportunity to cheat. The group that recalled the books cheated, just as before. But the group that had recalled the 10 commandments, they didn't cheat at all. Not even a little bit. The simple act of thinking about a moral benchmark, just for a moment before temptation, was enough to eliminate dishonesty completely. It didn't even matter if they could remember all 10, or even any of them. Just trying was enough. He got the same result when he had students sign a statement that said, "I understand this study falls under the MIT Honor Code, even though MIT doesn't have an honor code." The simple reminder of morality was the key. But the story of our dishonesty has one final, crucial twist. Ariely noticed that most large-scale financial scandals, and most of our everyday cheating, doesn't involve cash directly. It's one step removed. So he placed 6 packs of Coke in the communal refrigerators in MIT dorms. Within 72 hours, they were all gone. Then he placed plates with 6 $1 bills in the same refrigerators. After 72 hours, not a single dollar had been taken. To test this in the lab, he used his math test again. But this time, instead of paying people in cash, he paid them in tokens, which they then had to walk 12 feet across the room to exchange for cash. The results were astounding. People who were cheating for tokens cheated twice as much as people cheating for cash. Being just one step removed from money, dealing with a stock option, an expense report, an insurance claim, a frequent flyer mile, or a token, makes our moral compass go fuzzy. It allows our ability to rationalize, to run wild. We can cheat to a much greater degree without feeling like we're bad people. This, Ariely suggests, is the secret behind so much white-collar crime and everyday dishonesty we see in the world. The architects of the Enron scandal were stealing millions from people's pensions, but they probably wouldn't have been able to steal $100 from an old woman's purse. The psychological distance from cash made all the difference. Ultimately, Predictably Irrational is a book that holds up a mirror to our own minds. It reveals that we're not the masters of our own universe we believe ourselves to be. We're influenced by the context of our choices, by the first prices we see, by the allure of free, by the invisible line between social and market worlds, by the passions that turn us into strangers, by our constant struggle with temptation, and by the fuzzy boundaries of our own integrity. This might sound like a depressing conclusion, but Ariely sees it as a source of great hope. If our irrationality is predictable, it means we can do something about it. By understanding our flaws, we can design our world to protect us from them. This is what behavioral economics calls a free lunch. Not something for nothing, but the opportunity to improve our lives and our society by acknowledging our human limitations and building better systems. We can create self-control credit cards, we can design Save More Tomorrow retirement plans, and we can use moral reminders to foster honesty. We're not noble in reason, but that's okay. The wonder, as Dan Ariely so beautifully shows us, isn't in our perfection, but in our fascinating, complex, and deeply human imperfection. And in understanding it, we find the real key to making better decisions and building a better world. As we come to the end of our journey through Predictably Irrational, it's worth pausing to reflect on the sheer power of the ideas Dan Ariely has shared with us. What I find most profound about this book is that it's not just a collection of fascinating studies. It's a deeply compassionate look at the human condition. Ariely isn't judging us for our flaws. He's celebrating the beautiful complexity of our minds and offering us a roadmap to navigate them more wisely. The biggest lesson, for me, is the humility this book teaches. We walk through life with a deep-seated belief in our own rationality and control. We think we choose our careers, our partners, and our beliefs based on careful, logical thought. But Ariely pulls back the curtain and shows us that so much of what we do is guided by forces we barely perceive. The decoy sitting next to the product we bought, the first price we ever saw for a cup of coffee, the emotional state we were in when we made a promise we couldn't keep. Recognizing this is humbling, but it's also incredibly liberating. It frees us from the burden of believing we have to be perfect, and instead empowers us to be smarter about our imperfections. In a world constantly trying to sell us something, the lessons on relativity and anchoring feel more urgent than ever. We're bombarded with choices, and marketers are masters at arranging those choices to nudge us toward their preferred outcome. But now you have the secret code. Next time you see 3 options, you can consciously ask yourself, which one is the decoy? Next time you feel an irrational pull toward a free offer, you can pause and ask, Is this truly free, or is it costing me a better choice? This knowledge doesn't make the pull of irrationality go away, but it gives you a fighting chance to resist it. But the most powerful and actionable idea in the entire book, I believe, is the concept of pre-commitment. This is where Ariely moves from diagnoses to cure. The realization that our cold, rational self can make decisions to bind our future hot, emotional self is a practical superpower. It's the difference between hoping you'll save money and setting up an automatic transfer to your savings account the day you get paid. It's the difference between vowing to finish a project and setting binding, intermediate deadlines with a friend or colleague. This single strategy can be applied to nearly every long-term goal you have, transforming wishful thinking into real-world progress. So here are a few simple ways you can start applying these lessons today. First, run a relativity check. Next time you have to make a significant purchase, from a new laptop to a winter coat, consciously change the context. Look at it next to a much more expensive option, then next to a much cheaper one. Deliberately go to a different store with a different layout. By consciously manipulating the comparisons, you can begin to see how much your perception of value is being shaped by context and get closer to what you truly want. Second, design one pre-commitment device for yourself this week. Pick one area where you struggle with self-control. Is it hitting the snooze button? Mindless snacking in the evening? Checking your phone when you should be working? Design one simple, unbreakable rule to help your future self. Put your alarm clock across the room. Don't buy the snacks in the first place. Or use an app to block distracting websites for a set period. Make a choice in your calm state to protect yourself from your impulsive one. Finally, leverage the power of moral reminders. Before you file your taxes, fill out an expense report, or even just make a promise to someone, take a moment to write down a simple statement of your values. It doesn't have to be the 10 Commandments. It could be as simple as, I am an honest person who acts with integrity. As Ariely's research shows, that small act of priming your conscience can have a profound effect on the choices you make next. That was a summary of Predictably Irrational by Dan Ariely. We've explored the highlights today, but I'll be honest with you, a summary can only take you so far. The real magic happens when you read the book for yourself. It's in the quiet moments when a particular story or simple phrase hits you in a way you didn't expect. This summary is designed to help you decide if this book is worth your time. If anything we've talked about today has resonated with you, I truly encourage you to grab a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning. It's an experience that can genuinely change the way you see yourself in your daily life. A link to the book is in the description below. Also, if you found this journey valuable, please show your support by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. That way, you won't miss our next exploration into another life-changing book from the billionaire's bookshelf. Thank you for listening, and let's keep growing together.